بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه الطيبين الطاهرين. Let's make our intentions sincerely for the sake of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. In our previous session we spoke about the kufr actions, and we spoke about the kufr sayings as well as the beliefs. It is an obligation upon whomever commits apostasy, whichever person was a Muslim and then they committed kufr, they are said to have committed apostasy. They are obligated to return immediately to Al-Islam while renouncing whatever caused it. So in order for a person to return to Al-Islam, they would only be able to do that if they left out what made them a kafir. So let's say that was a kufr belief. Let's say there was a person who was a Muslim, and then he heard something on the television, or he read a post somewhere on Facebook or something, and in that post it said something kufr. Like, for example, it said that Allah is something in the sky that comes down every night. And this is not true. And this person believed it. They didn't even utter anything, but they read it and they believed it. Such that they told themselves, tonight I'm going to wake up in the night because supposedly Allah comes down in the night. So this is how far they went with it. They believed it. By believing it, they become a kafir. Now, the only way that they can become a Muslim is if they say the Shahada, whilst now also leaving out. They need to separate themselves from that bad belief. So if a person said, after now having acquired that bad belief, if they said, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, whilst they still hold that kufr belief, they would not become Muslim. Even if they said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah 1,000,000 times, this person would not become a Muslim. This person would not become a Muslim. Why? Because they still carry a kufr belief. So in order for a person to become a Muslim, when they say the shahadatain, the two shahadas, they need to have separated themselves from what made them a kafir. Okay? So this is the example of the kufr belief. If we take an example of a kufr saying, if somebody knew that Jibreel alayhi salam or Jibra'il alayhi salam is an angel, and whilst knowing he's an angel, he said, for example, Jibreel is, and he insulted him. If he swore at Jibreel alayhi salam, the angel, whilst knowing he's an angel, if he said Jibreel is, and he mentioned a swear word, this person would become a kafir, even if he or she, even if they didn't know that if I say this, it makes me a kafir, they still become a non-Muslim. So now they would remain a non-Muslim until they do what? Until they say the two testifications whilst renouncing what they had done, whilst believing in their heart that what I did was a bad thing, what I did actually made me a non-Muslim. If they do that, and how would they be able to do that unless they learn, unless they attend a gathering of religious knowledge, and then they learn that to swear at something that Allah gave a high status to swear at such a thing makes you a non-Muslim. So the person who swore at this angel whilst knowing that this is an angel, and then they continued believing that there's nothing wrong with that. They lived their life, another 10 or 15 or 20 years, they lived their life not believing that it's kufr, i.e. believing that it's okay. Not even, let's say, batting an eyelid, not even flinching, not even thinking about it again. That they insulted Jibreel alayhi salam. That person, when they insulted Jibreel alayhi salam and they knew he was an angel, that person became a kafir. And they remained a kafir so long as they have not renounced it. They still carry the belief that it's okay. Remember, embracing al-Islam, or in general, repenting, the essence is to apologize. Okay? If you want to apologize for something, you need to know what you did wrong. Just as if someone comes to you and they say, look, I'm sorry for everything. But you want them to know that that thing was the thing that hurt you. Otherwise, how would you have peace of mind? You want them to know, look, that is the thing that hurt me. You're just saying, you're sorry in general, but are you going to learn your lesson? If you want to apologize, you need to know what you're sorry for, so that you can apologize for it. So in this example, if a person just says, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, they don't become Muslim unless they know that what they did was wrong. And hence that's why they're repenting. So a person needs to continue learning the religious knowledge. So this is an example now of having had a kufr belief, so they committed kufr, and they remained upon it until they learned that it was kufr. Then when they say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, do they become Muslim? Likewise, we've given an example now of a kufr statement, someone who swore at an angel. Let's look at another example. If somebody was to deliberately stand on the name of Allah, they put their foot on the name of Allah, this is kufr, of course. Likewise, if they stood on the Quran or touched the Quran deliberately with their foot, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, would not benefit this person, saying it, would not benefit this person unless they judged what they had done as kufr. If a person, just to hit home more this notion of a person needs to renounce, step away from, recognize as bad what they did, such that if they continued to do what made them a kafir, then their repentance wouldn't be valid. Like the person who, wal-'ayadhu billah, saw the name of Allah and put his foot on it. This is kufr. So long as their foot is on the name of Allah, whilst they know, even if they say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, with the intention of embracing al-Islam, they won't enter al-Islam because they're still in the kufr act. Like that person who still had the kufr belief. Like that person who still believed it was okay to say the kufr. Right? A person needs to separate themselves from that kufr, and that only occurs by learning. There's no other way. That's why a person needs to keep learning and learning and learning and learning, because Allah knows best. A person might have done something in the past which they fell into a sin because of, or even worse, it might have been kufr. So how would they ever untie that knot that was knotted so many years ago? By learning. They would learn that that's kufr. Then they would say the shahada and that knot would be untied. Otherwise, a person might live in negligence for years. For years thinking that they are upon the truth. When in actual fact they would not be on the truth. So it is an obligation upon whomever commits apostasy to return immediately to al-Islam. And we've touched upon this issue as well, about the immediacy, right? So if somebody wants to embrace al-Islam, then they do that immediately. Because every moment or every period of time in which they do not embrace al-Islam, they are a kafir. Because they're not a Muslim, so what are they? They're a kafir. And if a person knows that they need to embrace al-Islam, and they delay, then it's as though they are saying, it's okay for me to be a kafir a little longer. And the scholars explain this issue exactly in this way. Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, he said, Ar-rida bil-kufr kufr. He said, accepting kufr is itself kufr. And this example was given of a person delaying embracing al-Islam. So, we spoke previously about if somebody comes to you and says, I want to embrace al-Islam, tell me how to embrace al-Islam. What do you do straight away? You say to them, without saying anything else, you say, no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah or except God, and Muhammad, or you could say Abul Qasim, is the messenger of God. This is Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam. They say that and they would embrace al-Islam. So it's important not to do what sometimes we may see on the screen. Sometimes a person says, I want to embrace al-Islam. So the ignorant speaker would say, oh, really, come to the front, come to the front. And they would prepare a mic and they would say, oh, so firstly, how did you hear about al-Islam? Are your family members Muslims? Who brought you to the gathering today? And they're interacting with this person and then with the audience. And then eventually they would get him to say the Shahada. This person who does that, this person who delays another person from embracing al-Islam, this person himself commits kufr. Sometimes you see some people saying the strangest of things. They say to them, are you being forced? Have you thought about it? Do you want more time to think about it? Maybe they'll say things like, do you want to go read a book? Sometimes some people will say, no, you need to take a shower first or have a bath first. No, a non-Muslim, if he or she wants to embrace al-Islam, then even if they haven't had a shower or a bath, what is worse? What is worse? A person being in a state of disbelief or a person being in a state where they need to take an obligatory bath? It's obvious, isn't it? So you get rid of the worst of the two states by getting the person to embrace al-Islam. Then later you tell them, go and have a bath if you had been junub and so on. So it's not permissible to delay a person from embracing al-Islam. You remember the example that one of the scholars gave maybe 800 years ago. He said, if somebody wants to embrace al-Islam and the khatib, the imam, he is standing on the mimbar, on the pulpit, Yawm al-Jumu'ah, on a Friday, giving the khutbah. There might be thousands of people there. If a non-Muslim walks in and says to him, tell me how to embrace al-Islam, and he, the one giving the speech, says later or after the speech, Al-Hafiz An-Nawawi said, Kafar al-Khatib. He commits kufr. So knowing this comes only by acquiring the religious knowledge. We've mentioned before how we are in times where people are saying many different things just for the sake of speaking sometimes, and they are falling into deep holes. So a person must leave out what caused their kufr. If the apostasy was due to stepping upon the book of the Quran or the like, then the return to al-Islam would not be valid whilst that person is still standing on the book of the Quran. A person would need to stop believing what is kufr, or stop believing that it's permissible to say something kufr, and then say the shahadatain. The scholars wrote books because they were afraid of something. They were afraid of what's happening a lot today. What happens today is that some people, they are complacent. They are in this false sense of security where they think that a person, if they're a Muslim, then unless they intend to leave al-Islam, they remain a Muslim. And that's not true. That's not true. The Prophet himself, alayhi salatu wasalam, said that there will be people from my nation who commit kufr and they don't even realize. They don't even realize. So is it scary? Yes, it's scary. In the past, you would find a scholar, a real scholar, at kulli masafat qasr, which is like every, or closer than that, which is every, let's say 16 miles, every 16 miles you would find a scholar where you could go to ask the religious judgments of things that would happen to you, things that you didn't know, cases that came up, whether to do with marriage and divorce or custody of the children, or things to do with fasting and prayer and belief and things like that. There would be scholars all around. But the Prophet ﷺ said that the knowledge would be lifted by the death of these scholars, the real scholars. So we today are in a tough situation. We are in a tough situation. Hence, to return to al-Islam, one also needs to utter the two testifications of faith. So this means it's not enough for a person, if they commit kufr, to admit in their heart. It's not enough to admit in their heart that they've done wrong, and then to think that that's enough to rectify the situation. No, the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam said, أمرت أن أقاتل الناس حتى يشهدوا, in a narration, حتى يقولوا, until people utter. People need to utter the testifications of faith, and that's how they enter al-Islam. The scholar said if somebody commits kufr and then they realize they've committed kufr, and now they have, if you like, the correct belief. If they don't utter, and they are able to utter, they don't utter the two testifications of faith, and they die, they will be in hellfire forever without an end. So they need to utter. Okay? What else needs to be there? Does a person need witnesses? The answer is no. A person doesn't need witnesses. Can they say, should they say the shahada anywhere? Yeah, anywhere. Anywhere. A person might remember, for example, that they said something at the time they didn't realize that it was kufr. Then the only place, let's say, they remember is when they're in the bathroom. Here, they say the shahada. Okay? And like I said, there are no need for any witnesses, but a person has to say it loud enough for themselves to hear. So if they said it in a whisper, then usually a person can hear their own whisper. What is not valid is to, what we call, say it in the heart. It's not valid. Just like it's not valid to, when you pray, right? It's not valid for a person to recite Al-Fatiha in the heart. The prayer, this would not be correct. Sometimes you might see a person standing, and as though their lips are stapled shut. This is not how the prayer is. Al-Fatiha, one needs to recite it in the prayer. We're going to go through these details, of course. One needs to recite it in the prayer loud enough for themselves to hear, which is in a whisper. Like that is this case of saying the two testifications. And again, a person doesn't need witnesses. I say this because there was a person, subhanallah, who in front of me once, we told him to say the shahada, and he said to us, yes, I'm going to say the shahada, come with me. So he grabbed me. I said, say the shahada, and he walked with me to another person, and he said, oh, I've got two witnesses now I'll say it. No, you're not allowed to delay yourself from saying the shahada like that. A person doesn't need two witnesses. A person doesn't need two witnesses to enter al-Islam. Is that clear? Are those matters clear? Does anybody have a question up to that? Okay. Yes. Sorry, I didn't hear everything you said. You said there may be things.
What is an example of someone might accidentally commit kufr?
Okay, I'll give you an example. So, this revolves around a person not accidentally doing something per se, but that they did something and they didn't know it was kufr, and they committed kufr without them even knowing. So an example is, if a person didn't learn the rule, which is that if a person knows something to be haram in Islam, if they, jokingly let's say, if they said it was the opposite, they said it was halal, then they would commit kufr by that. And this is an example of a person not having learned the rule, but them not having learned the rule is not an excuse. They are not excused. I'll give you an example that everybody will understand. We all know that eating pork, eating the pig, is haram. So a person who knows that it's haram, rarely will you find a Muslim who doesn't know that. Even the non-Muslims, most of them, they know that we don't eat that. So if a person knows that eating pork is haram, and they say it's halal, and they meant it as a joke, but this person, because they've legitimized something that Allah made prohibited, this person becomes a non-Muslim. See, even if they didn't know what the consequence was, the consequence is that they become a non-Muslim. But them not knowing the answer, them not knowing that they'll become a non-Muslim, doesn't save them from becoming a non-Muslim. That's one example. And this, because many people don't know this rule that it used to be taught to 6 and 7 year olds in the past. They would memorize Islamic texts for children, but this is among the things that they would mention to them and then explain to them. Scholars would write poetry so that it was more, let's say, entertaining for children, because it was rhythmical, it rhymed. So they'd memorize them, and then they'd be explained to them that you can't say something against the rules of the religion, you can't lie. The essence is lying, isn't it? One knows that they are lying, they are belying the religion. That's one example. Another example is that a person might do something belittling to something that they know has a high status. Like there was this person, I think I mentioned this as well, they were working in a publishing house where they would print books, and they would print books, copies of the Quran. And this person, knowing that there were copies of the Quran there, they wanted to get to a higher shelf, and there was a pallet, and they knew that it was there, and the books of the Quran there. So what did they do? They got up onto it. They put their foot onto it. They stood on it to get to the higher shelf. This is kufr. It's not that this person forgot that these were copies of the Quran. No, forgetting is a different issue, isn't it? It's not that they forgot. They knew that it was the Quran. There are some things that they are inherently derogatory. Inherently they are mocking. So even if a person didn't learn that, oh, this is something bad, right? Even if they didn't learn. If they do it, then they become a kafir. Like the example of swearing at an angel, or swearing, insulting something that one knows has a high status. The easier examples are those that are related to belief. To belief. Like to attribute to Allah what does not befit Allah. Like to believe that Allah is in the sky. Such a person is not excused. Like to believe that Allah has hands or a face, or that Allah is a light. This person is not excused. So these are some examples. So the reason why why I don't give a lot of examples, you might think I've already given a lot of examples, but the reason why is because there are so many examples. So the rule is taught, and then once a person knows the rule, they can apply it. Yeah? Is that clear, sister? Yeah? So if there was a person who was a Muslim, and this person committed kufr, okay, whether it was a male or a female, then this invalidates the fast. If they were fasting, let's say it was the day of Ramadan, and they started their fast, then during the day, something kufr occurred from them. Okay? They believed something kufr, or they said something kufr, or they did an act deliberately of kufr. Then they would have left al-Islam at that moment, of course, and their fast that they were fasting, this would be invalidated. This would be invalidated. So what does this person need to do? Very obviously, they must immediately return to al-Islam. If they recognize what they did was kufr, and they say the shahadatain, the two shahadas, then they would return to al-Islam. Then, let's say this happened at 3:30 p.m. and the fast actually opens at like 8. Yeah? So now because they've committed kufr and they've embraced al-Islam again, and the fast is broken, invalidated, they can't eat until al-Maghrib. Not because their fast is valid, no, we've said the fast is invalid because they committed kufr. But because Ramadan, it has a special status whereby a person, if they commit kufr in this way, they are reprimanded by not being allowed to eat for the rest of the day. And additionally, of course, one needs to redo this fast. They need to make it up after Al-Eid. Immediately they would have to make it up. Also, if a person was married and one of the spouses, either the husband or the wife, committed kufr. If one of them committed kufr, then this immediately breaches the marriage contract. It cuts the marriage contract. Which means what? If he committed kufr, or she, he is no longer her husband and she is no longer his wife. He might be at work and she, let's say, was also at work. She works somewhere else. Something happened and she got really angry and she said something that was kufr. So now what has happened? The marriage contract is broken. Which means what? They're not husband and wife. Which means what? They cannot be alone together. Which means that he can't touch her hand. For example, it's not his wife. So what happens in this situation? Of course, that person would have to embrace al-Islam immediately. If someone said to her, look, you can't say that, this is kufr. Say the shahada. So she embraces al-Islam. And then they would, if they still wanted to carry on their life together, then they would need to do a new marriage contract. They would need to do a new marriage contract. And remember, that doesn't mean, doing a new marriage contract doesn't mean that you have to spend £20,000 again and have a large ceremony and get dressed no. A marriage contract is something that happens. It's a verbal thing. It's between the guardian of the female and the groom-to-be and two witnesses, two Muslim witnesses. That's it. Even a person's pubescent son, if they have two pubescent sons, they can be witnesses. Two Muslim pubescent sons, they can be witnesses. This is a serious issue. Some people, when they fall into kufr, either because they don't know, or they do know and they think it's embarrassing for them to do the marriage contract again, they live on with this person that is not their husband or not their wife. They live on with them. And their living together is not permissible. And their relationship would be one of zina. Their intimacy would be zina, an enormous sin. Any child born from that relationship while they're not married would be an illegitimate child. Of course, the child itself is not to blame, the child. But then that impacts certain matters on who is obligated to provide for the child. Will the child receive inheritance or not from the biological father? And subhanallah, there are a lot of matters that are involved with this. So, committing kufr invalidates the marriage contract. Invalidates the marriage contract. Now, this is if kufr occurs any time during the marriage. Okay? Sometimes there's a bit of confusion amongst some people. If a person got married today, if they got married to someone, so a man married a woman, and they haven't yet consummated the marriage, they haven't engaged in the initial intimacy, okay? And one of them committed kufr. Let's say the marriage contract, the nikah itself has just happened, people have witnessed it, and let's say they're still sitting where they were, okay? And then one of them commits kufr. That marriage contract is cut, that's it. Even now, if it was after the consummation of the marriage, even if it was 16 years into the relationship, and they had children and so on, halal children because they're married, then one of them committed kufr, is way after the consummation, the initial consummation of the marriage. Then in this situation, if one of them committed kufr, the marriage contract would be cut. It would be invalidated. It would be breached. One looks to fearing Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. As long as one knows, as long as a person knows that I am doing what Allah has ordered. I don't want to, for the sake of supposedly saving face, or I might be embarrassed, or no, I'm not looking at that. I look at the fact that I don't want to be punished in the grave. I don't want what I do in this life, what I might potentially do in this life of evil deeds, disobeying Allah. I don't want that to have any bearing on me in the hereafter, so I'm not going to do that in the first place. And our religion, it is easy. The religious rules are very, very easy. So whether the kufr occurred before the consummation of the marriage or after it, Is that clear up to there? Is there anything that needs clarification there? Yeah? The Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا جَاءَكُمْ مَنْ تَرْضَوْنَ دِينَهُ وَخُلُقَهُ فَزَوِّجُوهُ. If somebody comes to you, if a young man comes to you and asks for your daughter's hand in marriage, then if you are تَرْضَوْنَ دِينَهُ وَخُلُقَهُ فَزَوِّجُوهُ, if you accept his religion, meaning if you know that he is a Muslim, he's someone who doesn't have a kufr belief and so on, he's someone who knows, he has the personal obligatory knowledge, he has that, so he's safe, he's a Muslim. If you accept his religiosity, it's at a good level, and you accept his manners, then marry him off. So the Prophet ﷺ advised us with two things. Why did he advise us with the first? That's because a Muslim woman is not allowed to marry a non-Muslim man. Whether this non-Muslim man be someone who doesn't believe in God, or someone who is a Jew or a Christian, a Muslim woman is not allowed to marry such a man Islamically. Likewise, a person who was a Muslim and now they're not a Muslim. Sometimes this happens. Sometimes a person, you may be talking to them and they say something that is kufr. So you tell them, you're not allowed to say that. This is kufr, this saying. And this particular thing that you mentioned, there's no excuse for it. Like once it was mentioned to me that a person, he came to give a speech in one of our localities. And he came and he said, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, about a prophet. And this is kufr because it's insulting a prophet. He said that Ayyub alayhi salam, he was so ill and he stunk. So they evicted him from the city because he smelled that bad. This is kufr to say about a prophet. And of course it wasn't true, it's not true. Kufr to say that about a prophet. So sometimes when people say things like that, you're obligated to say to them, because you're a believer and you defend the prophets, you defend the correct belief, so you say to them, you're not allowed to say that. This is a kufr statement. I'm not going to stand here and have you insulting a prophet of Allah. This is kufr. You've exited al-Islam. You need to say the shahada. Sometimes some people, they think they have religious knowledge. And they'll tell you, no, I was only joking, or I didn't mean it like that, or there's some things, they might not have understood, that's a different issue, but here, this is explicit. So this person now is a non-Muslim. Even if they themselves, on Friday, they will take a bath and go to the masjid and perform the shape of the prayer. When When Eid comes, they will go to the masjid, wear new clothes and perform the shape of the Eid prayer. When Ramadan comes, they will starve themselves and they will not eat or drink anything until... So this is a person who thinks he's a Muslim or she's a Muslim, but they're not, because they have that kufr that they did hanging over them. That governs their whole situation now until they repent. So such a person, such a man, or such a young man even, if you know this person to have an incorrect belief, a kufr belief, you're not allowed to give your daughter away to him because he's a non-Muslim. And the Muslim woman is not allowed to marry a non-Muslim man, whoever it may be. So the marriage contract of the apostate is not valid. I.e., the apostate's marriage contract to a Muslim or anyone else is not valid. So let's talk about that man again. That man he thought he was a Muslim, but he said something kufr, he's a non-Muslim. If he says to you, I'm getting married, are you going to come to my walima? No, you can't go. You can't even congratulate him because his marriage is not valid to anyone. So, subhanallah, there are situations that when you learn about them, you learn how to protect yourself. What the apostate slaughters is Islamically unlawful, haram. So isn't it that we're allowed to eat meat that is slaughtered by a Muslim, by a Christian, and a Jew? We're allowed to eat that meat that is slaughtered by them. Allah granted us this ease. But if a person who was a Muslim and is not now a Muslim, even if they think they are a Muslim, if you heard something from them that is kufr, hence you don't judge them as a Muslim, any meat that they slaughter with their hands, okay, and that meat is haram for you to eat. It is not permissible for one of us to eat that meat. In other words, it is not permissible, it is haram to eat what the apostate slaughters, even if he apparently slaughters in the same way as Muslims. Even if he cuts the right areas and he drains the blood and he does everything as his apparent right, it's not permissible to eat that meat. The apostate does not inherit from his Muslim relatives that die, nor is the apostate's wealth inherited. I.e., the apostate, this person that was a Muslim and then became a non-Muslim, if the apostate dies in that state, so apparently they died as a kafir, without having returned to al-Islam, then the Muslim relatives do not inherit. So if one of us heard something from a from a relative, something that is kufr, like for example, is present in some books that were attributed to scholars. Sometimes things are added to books. In the past, it wasn't like today. Like you have an ISBN number and things are printed electronically and it's caught out and people try to, what they call, plagiarize. It wasn't like that. People used to hire sometimes non-Muslims to take the ink and to make copies of books. So they would add things sometimes, strange things. So in some books it says something that is kufr, but some people nowadays, they believe it. I had an experience with somebody who, it was very apparent that they believed it. It says in some books, and this is kufr, it says in some books that if a person is ill, then they can get urine and write Al-Fatiha out, and that would, insha'Allah, cure a person. This is kufr. This is insulting Al-Fatiha, right? This is insulting the first chapter of the Quran. So imagine somebody believed that. Somebody believed that, you can write it out and it has a cure. This person would be a kafir. So if one of us knew a relative that says that, and then that relative died. Firstly, because, as is apparent, they died as a kafir. That's the only thing that I knew of them, that they said that to me, and I told them to repent. They didn't repent. So I can't pray the janazah now. Why? Because the janazah is seeking forgiveness for this Muslim that died, but this person's not even a Muslim, so I can't seek forgiveness for them. So that's the janazah gone. What about inheritance? Yeah, likewise, inheritance. If this was somebody who I would usually inherit from, because they died as an apostate, that money now, even if the government says to me, yeah, this is your money, this is your inheritance, Islamically I know better, I can't take that money. There's something else that's done with that money, but I can't take it. It would not be permissible for me to take it. The Muslim relatives do not inherit the wealth that was acquired during the period of apostasy. So there's a detail here. There was a person who was a Muslim until, let's say, the age of 43. So what they acquired up until the age of 43, that is considered their money, right? Let's say they died at 67. At 43, they committed apostasy. Then the money that they acquired from 43 until 67, that money, it will not be inherited. A Muslim relative will not be able to inherit that. As for if they had any money left from, when they started to earn until 43, if some of that money had been left over, if they had some of that, then the Muslim relative could inherit from that. But usually, a lot of the time the money is mixed. What does a person usually do in that situation? They say, look, I will refrain. Rather, after any debts that were accrued while in the state of apostasy have been repaid, this wealth becomes fay. This is spent in a way that benefits the Muslims as defined by the rules of the religion. So the Muslim does not inherit from the apostate because this person apparently died as a non-Muslim. They do not inherit, with the detail, the money that was acquired during their apostasy. Like they had a job. They had a job and they were working. That money that they acquired whilst they were a non-Muslim, this cannot be inherited. And it would instead be given to something known as al-fay' Islamically, where it would be used for the benefit of the Muslims. A person themselves is not allowed to take that money as an inheritor. This money then is spent in a way that benefits the Muslims as defined by the rules of Islam, such as to suffice the needs of towns that are bordering the lands of the non-Muslims. So to fortify the borders. That money can be used for that. Building bridges, literally, physical bridges. And to suffice the needs of judges, the Islamic scholars who don't have a craft. For example, they may not have a craft, an expertise in a craft. Rather, they serve the religion of Islam. And likewise, it would go to the armed forces, the Islamic armed forces. The funeral prayer is not permissible or valid to be performed for the apostate. Because what we said, the funeral prayer, it contains asking forgiveness. And there is no forgiveness for this disbeliever after he's died. So it's not permissible to ask Allah to forgive this person. This is because this would be contradicting the book of Allah. Allah revealed in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ. Meaning that after a person dies as a non-Muslim, That's it. Allah revealed, Allah will not forgive that person. So now, once I know that, one of us, once we know that, and this person apparently died as a non-Muslim, we can't raise our hands and say, Ya Allah, forgive this person. Because Allah revealed, I won't forgive this person. So we'd be belying the religion to say, Ya Allah, I know you revealed that you won't forgive this person, but forgive this person. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. And nor is it permissible for the apostate to be buried in Muslim graveyards. Graveyards that were purchased, or a land that was purchased, and its use was restricted specifically for Muslims to be buried there. This is al-ard al-mawqufa, the land, like I said, that its use is restricted to be a Muslim cemetery. No non-Muslim can be buried there. And this person who was a Muslim but is not a Muslim anymore cannot be buried there. So this issue of a person becoming a non-Muslim, it is very real. But a person protects themselves by learning the religious knowledge. The scholars write in their books that it's an obligation upon a person to be Muslim, to stay Muslim, and to follow the rules of al-Islam. If a person learns the personal obligatory knowledge, and they control themselves, they control their tongue, and they have in their heart this they have in their heart that the Islamic matters, they have a high status. They uphold this glorification for the Islamic matters. Then such a person, insha'Allah, is safe. If a person is sincere, if they learn, if they review, if they know what they're doing, they stay safe. But it's when a person becomes complacent, a person becomes a little loose with their tongue, a person sometimes, when they're laughing and joking, they might enter into dangerous territory where they tell a lie. Lying is haram. Or it might get worse, they might commit a major sin, of which there is a lot nowadays. And then eventually they might commit kufr. Some people, subhanallah, when you tell them about what the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, it's not like the scholars made it up and they just wanted to be, one might say, as some people see it, just wanted to be strict on purpose. No. Our religion is beautiful, and the rules that are here are to be followed, and these are the best rules for people. It's just because so many people for so long, they haven't been learning the rules of the religion, and so it hits a person hard. People like me, for example, if we had lived, if I and you, if we had lived so many years ago, maybe 700 or 800 years ago in an Islamic country, these matters, we would have learned these when we were younger. These rules, we would have learned these when we were younger. History documents that very, very clearly. The books of the scholars and what they used to teach, and what people used to know, what the layperson used to know. It's very, very clear. But it's when there are a lot of contributing factors. It was inevitably going to happen like this anyway, where we were going to become weaker in knowledge, because the Prophet told us, alayhi salatu wassalam. But he also said about this time, فَطُوبَى لِلْغُرَبَاءِ. Those people, glad tidings to them, those people that stick to my methodology. They continue to learn. Even though it's tough, even though there are not many or almost none, almost no scholars around, but they learn from trustworthy and reliable people, all the way back to him, alayhi salatu wassalam. Can you imagine? Where else would a person have heard these rules if they hadn't attended a gathering of religious knowledge? And then, subhanAllah, there are those gatherings of religious knowledge today where people just like to entertain other people. They shout and they scream and they laugh and they, bellow here. And they, for some people, this is, in some cultures, this is what it's become. That we're going to go to the masjid to watch this electric speech, 50% of which we're not going to understand because he's speaking in Persian or he's speaking to a high level of the language that he's speaking, and he's just wowing the people. This is not the way of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ would repeat things for people. He would speak in language, in the language that was appropriate to the one that was listening. In how detailed he would mention things, or how much he would simplify it. ﷺ. And this is what makes sense. This is what makes sense. We ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to keep us steadfast. We ask Allah Ta'ala to grant us death upon al-Islam. We ask Allah to protect those who we want good for. Remember, because we are in the because we are in the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, and these are very blessed days. It said that there are no days in the year like these 10 days. So do the good deeds and ask Allah. These are really special days, the days leading up to the Hajj, especially the day of Arafah. So make lots of dua. Our Shaykh used to say that if a person knew the signs of the mercy of Allah, the abundant endowments, the blessings that descend from the sky, this blessed place that Allah created, when a person is in sajda, when a person has their forehead on the floor and they're supplicating to Allah, whether in their heart or the dua that they've learned, if a person knew the blessings that surround a person in that situation, they would not want to lift their head. So if you want something, yes, you make dua. If you want something, if you want your situation eased, a situation of a family member to be eased, for someone amongst your friends, let's say, to be guided, to be given some instruction, for your financial situation to become easier so you can provide for your family, for a daughter or a son that you have, for it to be facilitated for them to marry, make dua in your sujood. Pick out the times that the Prophet mentioned, alayhi salatu wasalam, that the dua is more likely to be answered there. Like before Al-Fajr, 30 minutes before Al-Fajr. Like in sajda, perform a sajda and make dua there, at that time. There are certain times in which there are more blessings and the dua is more likely to be answered. One of those times is the day of Arafah, the 9th of Dhul Hijjah. Between al-Dhuhr and the setting of the sun. A person might be walking in the street and they make dua, Ya Allah, grant me such and such. They're walking in the street. They're walking to their car and their dua might be answered because this is a special day. It's the best day of the year. Just as the night of Al-Qadr, Laylatul Qadr, just like it is the best night of the year, with so many blessings, Yawm Arafah, the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, it is the best day of the year. And the dua, insha'Allah, is answered. So don't fall short in these last 10 days. We are on day 6 or 7 now, subhanallah. So regularly say La ilaha illallah, perform a dhikr, do good deeds, because these days might not come back for yourselves or for myself. Okay, Barakallahu feekum. We'll stop here today. We'll start next time with a chapter of purification. MashaAllah, that's going to be very interesting. Talking about accountability and wudu and so on, insha'Allah ta'ala. Is there anything that was unclear or someone wants to ask a question? Yes? What do you mean they're not in the right frame of mind? What do you mean? So if they are actually insane, did it die? If they are actually insane, then this person would not be accountable, right? So if they uttered something while they were in that state, sometimes people, like the scholars mentioned, they may become insane for a moment. Sometimes that happens. It's not normally the case, but sometimes, very rarely, people can become so angry or so stressed that they become insane momentarily. Sometimes for 2 minutes, and then they come back. Some people are like that, they come and go. So if this person was actually in a state of insanity during that point, and they said something kufr, then the pen is lifted. Then that person is not held to account for that. Yeah? The person would, if they hear that from them, they would reprimand them, and then that person would say, for example, no, I never said that, or I don't remember saying that, or perhaps they know. Some people, they know that they go in and out, so they would say that no, this is not something that I meant to say, or I was insane, and so on. This once happened with someone who our Shaykh was with, Shaykh Abdullah, and the person that he was with was a good person. So that person that he was with suddenly swore at Allah, suddenly. And the Shaykh looked at him and said, Ya Fulan, kayfa takfur billah? Ya Fulan, oh such and such person, how is it that you commit kufr? Why are you saying kufr? And then he said, no, I don't say kufr. I didn't say kufr. What are you talking about? So then our Shaykh realized, he said that he must have become insane momentarily. And he was like that. This person, he would come and go like that. So the Shaykh judged him as a Muslim, and judged that he lost his mind for that moment. But a person has to reprimand that person. If even like when a child who doesn't understand, let's say a 9-month-old child, when they do something wrong, when, I don't know, if they poke you in the eye, right, and they laugh, you say to them, no. You kind of give them a no. They might try it again, but then when you do it a few more times, they understand. Like that, even the scholar said, if a person is insane and they do something that is kufr, yes, you reprimand them. You say to them, no. And they will have some form of understanding at least. Just like a small child, when you say, like that, stick your finger out like that, they have some sort of understanding, even though they don't know what's really going on. A young child, I'm saying. So a person must reprimand that person. Okay? Anything else? Anybody? Yes, that's fine. It's okay.
What if your life being subjected to so much torture and you say, say this and that, torture you, for example? For example, what might happen in Gaza, for example?
Yeah. So in this situation, this is an exception that the scholars mentioned. They said if somebody is threatened with death, if somebody says to a person, if you don't say this specific statement of kufr, like if someone says to somebody, if you don't say Jesus is the Son of God, I'm going to finish you. And a person knows that this threat, this person will carry out. Like for example, they have this to a person's head, right? And a person believes that they will do the deed. In this situation, it's dead. In that situation, when a person believes that they will carry out this threat, if a person was to utter that kufr statement whilst hating it in the heart, then they would be excused. Sayyiduna, is that clear? Sayyiduna Ammar ibn Yasir radiyallahu anhu came to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam saying, O Messenger of Allah, I've done something terrible. he said that the people of Mecca, they told me to say something kufr. And I didn't want to say it. But they threatened that they would actually kill me if I didn't say it. So I said it whilst hating it in the heart. So the Prophet said to him, alayhi salatu wasalam, if they do that to you again, then you can do that again. Right? But remember what I said, if a person threatens to kill someone, not if a person says, if you don't say it, I'm going to pull your nail out. No. If you don't say it, I'm going to break your hand. No. If you don't say it, I'm going to crack your shin. No, a person is not allowed to say it. If a person is threatened with death, and that person believes that that threat is imminent. Does that make sense? So that's one exception. There are other exceptions, but we'll mention them some other time, inshaAllah. I'm going to lose my voice now, inshaAllah. Okay? We'll stop there. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim.